Welcome to Rick's Europe. Today, we're going to discuss a topic that is so wild. And trust me, I've worked in politics for the past 5 years, but even I was shocked about it because this scandal is the scandal of all scandals and it has it all: corruption, backdoor deals, shady contracts, and of course, another sex scandal. And it all happened in Spain. So, what is going on there? First and foremost, 53 million in COVID mask contracts handed out through some shady backdoor deals. Companies that had nothing to do with medical supplies, fake invoices, cash handouts, and leaked audio recordings where government insiders casually discuss how to split the profits. And if you thought, wow, that's bad, wait, it gets even worse because a full blown scandal is coming up. Buses of Brazilian women brought in for private parties with a former transport minister. It's very bunga bunga Berlusconi style, of course, funded by the Spanish taxpayers. So what we're seeing in Spain is not just political misbehavior, it is a system that is supporting and protecting the elite that's entrenching and enriching themselves with this corruption. It seems that Spain, in all honesty, is in the middle of a crisis. People are starting to lose their faith in government, which is a very serious issue. Now, to really go deeper and understand what is going on and if Spain is on the verge of collapsing, I'm very happy that with us today is Jorge González-Gallarza. He is the senior fellow at the Center of Fundamental Right in the Madrid office for the Center of Fundamental Right. Jorge, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me on, Scarlett. It's great to be with you.
So, first and foremost, I really want to credit you because you sent me an incredible article that you wrote that I'm going to link in our bio, and I really want to urge all of our viewers to read it. It's called Socialist Spain is Drowning in Sleaze. And I did some research on it, and actually, you're the only journalist that does such a good job giving a whole overview and understanding of all the corruption situations that is happening, because it's not one instance, it's not one scandal, it's a total of different scandals. So it also says a lot about the fact that they are trying to rub this under the carpet. So thank you for breaking out that story. But when I was reading your article, I had to reread it a couple of times because I could not believe it. It's so wild that I think that even the writers of the script of House of Cards are jealous.
Mhm.
This is wilder than any Netflix series could imagine. So please try to help us understand what is going on in your country.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much again for having me on. And I think, I think it's a testament to the depth of the sleaze and the moral and the moral abyss into which we're drowning, as you said, that House of Cards, as you've just quipped, would be jealous of this kind of series of scandals. As you said, this is not just one. But I think in some ways it is a different kind of scandal from what you would see in a series like House of Cards. This is not a scandal where the socialists have been trying, although that may have been a part of it too, but it's not exclusively a scandal in which, a rogue autocrat or an autocratic ruler or, someone with despotic tendencies is like, snuffing out opponents or trying to drown a compromising hush hush or corruption revelations. They're trying to drown it in sort of um, through, say, intimidation or that kind of thing. This is like a much like rancor and a baser form of corruption. This is like, as you said, like prostitution. This is like politicians and a
Yeah.
series of really high level, high ranking senior politicians within a socialist and proclaimed or allegedly feminist government that have been, systematically, while in the execution of their public duties, they have been indulging in sex services, prostitution, calling, as you said, like busloads of prostitutes into hotels they were staying at. This actually happened, and so I would say it's a different kind of scandal. I think the piece that you mentioned records or itemizes a series of such scandals, and they're not just dealing with they're not just prostitution cases, as you said, there's a fair amount of kind of material corruption, right? Things to do with procurement rigging, right? Rigging contracts. And that's kind of, I think, the older forms of corruption to which Spaniards had been accustomed for a long time. But I think, and we can sort of go one by one and recount them all. I think
Please.
in just 30 seconds, I'll just kind of like thread the needle. Um, we've had a socialist government since 2019, which got reelected in 2023. It's a very feeble, kind of weak government where the Socialist Party relies on the votes of separatist votes, or relies on the votes of separatist parties, parties from Catalonia, the Basque Country, Galicia, regions where there are regionalist sensibilities, the purpose of which is to get more money and autonomy for those regions. But these options, these regional options, have struck a deal with the National Socialist Party, and they're in power, ruling over the nation. So the corruption scandals really started, as you mentioned, with COVID, or some of the major corruption scandals that we know of now started with COVID, when it was revealed after a while, when the virus had subsided, it was revealed that the Minister for Transport at the time, Jose Luis Ábalos, and his chief of staff, who was a nightclub bouncer, or had been a nightclub bouncer for a living, but was Ábalos' chief of staff, serving under him at the transport ministry. They had been basically rigging contracts for PPE contractors, right? Handing out massive multi-million euro contracts to certain companies that had maybe even had no experience in supplying PPE, supplying, right, gowns, masks, and that kind of thing. But it really was a rank form of nepotism. Um, and that was kind of like one node of the problem, right? And that and that was, it's called like the Coldo case, and there's like a number of people involved around him, but that was the nature of that case. It was rigging contracts while Spaniards were locked away in their homes. They couldn't visit their loved ones. They were suffering under COVID, etc., etc. But then there's been, like, after all this began to be investigated, there's been the whole thing around like the actual moral tenor of these people in their private lives. They were hiring prostitutes. They were surrounded by prostitutes. They worked around them like much of their time, and um, and that was like a whole different part of the scandal. And the details are pretty gruesome, but they're in the piece. Perhaps we shouldn't get into the very nitty gritty of a neat.
Well, I mean, it was interesting because a lot of these prostitutes even made a career out of it, that they got positions in very luxury state-owned hotels. One even became a director. I mean, talking about an upgrade, good for them. But
Yeah,
is this fair? Of course not. It's still a deep betrayal to the Spanish people.
yeah.
How big is the scope of that scandal?
So this isn't just a scandal, as you said, where you would have like a senior politician, um, kind of like indulging his low urges, or like, hiring prostitutes in his downtime or spare time. This is senior ministers of a socialist feminist government, while on duty, while they're out traveling around the country, supervising works on a high-speed train line, for instance, in the northeast of Spain, in Aragon, at the hotel they were staying at, which is a state-owned hotel, bringing in these prostitutes and having like a rock star kind of party, trashing the suite, trashing the room, leaving plenty of cocaine leftovers, and trashing the chairs, trashing the bed. So but to your point, this is not just a case of them liking prostitution and paying for it. This is also a case of them running a sort of a sugar daddy operation with these sex workers, where they ended up placing a number of them in public companies, and they ended up looking for jobs for them because they were part of part of their operation, and they would also have compromising information. So I guess in order to sort of cover their backs, they would make sure they would land menial jobs as secretaries in these sorts of companies. But that's certainly part of the scandal, and that's the kind of the sexual part of the scandal. And then there's been a third leg of the scandal, and I'll close it here just so as not to bore your audience too much. But then there's been its third iterate, or a third kind of a outburst of revelations, and this was someone who few people suspected at the beginning could be involved in this was actually the ringleader of this whole thing, and he's now in prison. He was another socialist. He wasn't a minister. He was like the top commissar of the party. He was the secretary for organization within the party. He was like a political operative, not really serving the cabinet, but within the party. And he really was a high-ranking official within the party, and he's now in jail. So that's kind of that, and really this is simplifying things, but that I think englobes much there is to know.
I mean, Jorge, you're talking about in the rock and roll lifestyle of this politician paid by taxpayers. I don't think people are getting bored hearing you talk about it because it is sensational, but also very sad. Like we were talking in the beginning, there's a deep sense of betrayal. Um, and that's one sentence that you also said in your beautiful article, where you said, and I will quote it 1 second, is that you said, "We both found out that we had shipped as unwitting taxpayers into the sexual delights indulged by a former transport minister of ours." And I felt that sadness because you really hope that when you go to the ballot and you vote for people, even though they might not align with your political view, they still govern with your best interest. And now, time after time again, all they do is enrich themselves. Even more so, you're sponsoring their lavish lifestyle with prostitutes and drugs and everything that comes with it. I want to talk about that betrayal a little bit later, but before we discuss that, in all honesty, Jorge, you and we both work in politics, and I find it very hard to believe that even within the government or within the media, the mainstream media of Spain, this was very unknown. This is wow, overnight this became, world news, but they had no clue. No, usually these scandals they're known, they're just, they're trying to cover it up. Somebody's bribing probably Sanchez, but he didn't get what he wanted, so he was fed up and he decided to leak the story. What is your thought on that? Is this really a scandal that came out of the blue, or was this a long time cover up?
Well, that's such a good point, because the there's a feeling I think right now in Spain that the suspicions that exist and that hang over the heads of these socialist politicians, they are not being clarified with as much speed as we would like, even though they may be very grounded suspicions, even though we may already have enough leads that would lead us to believe that more cases are in the offing, or more cases will be revealed soon. The investigation and the prosecution is taking its time, and I just wanted to circle back and mention that actually the outlet that has revealed all of these cases, that has leaked the documents, that has leaked the hush hush and the compromising information. It's called the UCO, and they're housed within, well, let's say they're a rough equivalent of the FBI, right? So they're housed within a policing kind of quasi-military body within Spain. It's called the Civil Guard. But regardless, it's an entity, the UCO, within that, which has investigative powers, and so they have the ability of placing phone calls and getting documents and doing that kind of thing. So they're investigators, right? So they're the ones who have been um like using this or like activating this fire hose of sleaze, right? All of the information that we've gotten to know comes from most of the information comes from them. But there oftentimes, before the revelations are made, people know that revelations are in the offing. So there are rumors, like people start, like confiding in one another or rumoring that this or that socialist politician is next. They have dirt on him. He's going to be next in the string of revelations. He's going to be the next scandal is going to concern him, and he'll end up in jail or not. But it takes time, right? So to your question about why do we not know more, I think a lot of that is so there are several cases that are kind of open. There's also cases that surround the prime minister himself. The prime minister's wife was involved in a in a in a nepotism scandal, in influence peddling scandal. She was essentially trying to get and really succeeded at getting corporate giants from Spain, Spanish multinationals, to chip into a deanship that she wanted to have set up for herself, like within a university. She wanted to be a dean. She wanted to be a university professor. She doesn't even have a bachelor's degree from university, but she wanted to be a university dean, not just a professor. And she wanted companies to chip into that to be able to make it financially viable, using her role as first lady as influence over these companies. And and that's like another case that we may get to know more about. There's going to be revelations all over, right? Um, but the reason why this is not like, where the government is not imploded, I would say on one hand is because this is taking time, and the UCO has like timed its revelations. It has scheduled them. It's not revealing the whole thing at once. So people are saying that we're going to have a very rocky summer. People are saying that the month of August is going to be full of this sleaze. Um, but regardless, I think that even if we start, even if there starts being many more revelations, it isn't clear that the government will crumble, because we're already past the point where prior governments would have resigned, and they're not. This one's not resigning. Prime Minister Sanchez is not resigning, so it's quite unclear how much worse things can get, and whether that will be enough for them to resign, or whether we'll have elections in 2027 as is scheduled, or we will maybe not even have those elections.
Um, I'm trying to comprehend all of it. So that's interesting. Sanchez isn't just a pervert, so is his wife. Well, anyway, let's go back to the betrayal. You know, it's it's a sentiment that's echoed in the rest of Spain. And you also mentioned in an article that in general, because there's so many corruption scandals happening in your country, people are usually are like, ugh, another one, whatever. They sort of became immune to it. However, this time it is different. People are really fed up. Is that also what you experience and see? Do you see that there's a shift of attitude, that this is the line, this is where people draw, you know, we will not tolerate this anymore?
Yeah. Well, I think there may be a change in that direction. I don't think it's as momentous as it should be. I think people are realizing that things like the moral character of our rulers, or of our left-wing rulers, and the people ruling Spain at the moment, not necessarily the entire political class. Although there is a great deal of cynicism towards the entire political profession, but I think the socialists are certainly coming under the most flack and scrutiny. But but I think there may be a change in the direction that you've described, right? There's a way in which more people in Spain are now realizing, like, whoa, like we're being ruled by basically by by not just idiots, but actually pretty bad actors. Um, However, on the other hand, I also think, and I try to sort of make an argument around this in that piece, but there's this whole thing, and this has been actually mentioned by a couple of intelligent people in Spain already, the whole notion of like a just world bias. So when the going gets very rough, and when things get very ugly, our minds, this is a psychological mechanism, it's not even rational. Our minds tend to err on the side of things are not as bad. Because if they really are as bad as they look, then I should be rebelling. I should be out in the street. If we're really being ruled by a mafia, what am I doing at home? What am I doing talking to Scarlett right now through a platform? I should be out like demonstrating nonstop, or at least all my waking hours should be devoted to having the world know what's happening in Spain. So this like just world bias is like making people adjust to this new normal, where our political class is known to be much more corrupt, but people aren't really matching that with action. Um, so, but look, I think the real question is going to be like when there will be a political change in Spain, which most likely will be in 2027 in the summer of that year, when we'll have elections and there will be a new government. It may be a center-right government. It may be a coalition with Vox or whatever. Um, the question is what is going to really change, and I think that there's grounds for pessimism, because actually what we're seeing is not just the particular case of this government's corruption. We're seeing a whole system of incentives around any government that makes it very hard to tackle these cases, and that makes it very hard for political parties to not cover up the scandals that exist within them. And that's my longer term worry.
Yeah, and also, of course, it's interesting that Sanchez is still continuing to stand with Abalos. He's not distancing himself from it. He's not denying the accusations. He's saying, oh, we have to wait for the research. But I find it very hard to believe that one of his closest allies is involved with it and he wouldn't be. Because if they are hanging out every day, going to, having all those meetings together and all of the appointments where they have to be, then Abalos is going to go with the ladies of the night from Brazil having fun, and Sanchez is going to be the good guy saying, oh, no, 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 I got to go home because my wife is waiting for me. I don't buy that for 1 second. I would love to believe that because it is destroying my images of men, but unfortunately reality often proves to be different. So is he protecting him out of loyalty, or is this more trying to protect himself? Because if he doesn't, maybe some dirt about Sanchez will come out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's certainly very rational grounds to believe what you've just outlined. What is the prime minister's share in this moral scandal? To what extent was he involved? To what extent did he know? It's quite, you know, un, unplausible that he didn't know any of this was actually
Yeah.
happening, whether it is the rigging of contracts or whether it is the prostitution or anything else. He certainly knew what his wife was doing. They were a pretty tight couple, but um, but um, you know that we don't really have an answer to that question yet, and maybe, as you said and as you intuited, that will depend on what the people currently being not just investigated but trialed. And one of them is already in jail. One of the big fish is already in jail, as I mentioned, Santos Cerdan. The answer to your question will depend on what will they reveal about Sanchez that they know, because if they feel that there's already enough squabbling between them, between, for instance, Avalos and Santos Terdan. They're like throwing mud at each other, right? They're kind of pointing fingers at each other. You knew about this, you knew about that. I did this because you asked me to do this, this and that. So the question is, will they turn on the prime minister, or will they turn on anyone else? Because ultimately this is a whole like mafia dynamism, right? In the mafia, when one of the mafiosi gets caught, there's this omerta, right? There's this rule that none of the other mafiosi ought to reveal anything or any dirt or anything, or if they're asked about what this guy that we got do, then there's the kind of the rule of silence. And I think there's been actually something quite similar happen among the ministers. They've really had this omerta. Obviously, now that Avalos and Santos Terdan are out the window, now they're all flinging dirt at them because they're already in jail. So in order to keep the government in place, they have to concentrate all of the dirt on them and make sure to evacuate the scandal towards those that are already been trialed and that are at least dubious of having done these things, in order to preserve the government. But this whole thing is, how long is this going to last, right? Aren't they going to fling some mud back at those who have remained in place? Like, I certainly thought, I mean, actually, if you try to put yourself in the shoes of Avalos, you're like very bitter. You're very bitter.
Yeah.
You're being investigated, probably going to end up in a really dark place. And then meanwhile, like Sanchez and several others, whom you may know a thing or two about, are still comfortable in their ministries, running the country and doing things as nothing had happened, right?
I think you're completely right when you said in the beginning that this will be a very interesting summer where more revelations will come to light. And of course, we're going to follow up on that because I think we're just scratching the surface at the moment. However, what what we do know and what we can already can conclude is that Spain is being ruled in a system where the socialists are using public money to enrich not just themselves but also their friends. Even in the middle of a crisis like with COVID, so many cover-ups after cover-ups, political protection, and this is not an isolated incident. This is the system that is destroying Spain. And I'm wondering what would be the solution, because even if you would say, okay, everyone that is involved in this, the whole socialist government needs to go, and you would have elections, and tomorrow, Vox would win and they would actually have they would govern the country. Would that actually change something, or is there something fundamentally wrong with the system in itself?
Yeah. Well, I think one lesson that we can derive from this, regardless of, again, the specifics of the case and of the individual behaviors and conducts, one of the lessons we can derive about the system that made these scandals much harder to be revealed and tackled is what a lot of people call, and I certainly like this word, the partitocracy. The partitocracy meaning the rule of the political parties in a state in which a lot of the state's power hinges on or is vested upon the political party. So political parties in Spain name half of the judges. They can create para-ministerial quongos, so they can create like bodies within the state for their ideological agendas and pursuits. They can name people, they can give them salaries, they can create all these patronage networks. Political parties have immense power. They get to write the bill and they can reform it that regulates their activity. They can like decide like basically the budget that is allocated to the political parties as a whole, based on how many seats each party gets. They get like a subsidy, they get like an envelope, a check of money based on their result, which goes to fund their foundation or goes to fund a number of things. But so there have been parties in the history of Spain, and Vox has been one of them, and I think they're they're sincere about this. But there's been other parties in the past that also promised to end this system, to end this gravy train, this patronage network. That's going to be the harder bit. And unless you do that, if you don't reform the partitocracy and you have a moral party come to power, then you'll be fine, because the moral party will not incur in corruption. The system will be wrong, but the party will not act wrongly, so we'll be fine. But the chances are that we'll keep having every once in a while, a bad apple in the basket that rises to power,
Yeah.
and there's like a network of really bad actors around them, and the partitocracy is a system that shields them from the investigations, that shields them from any sort of moral outcry. There's also obviously the role of the media. There's like a very incestuous relationship between the media and the political parties. So those are the longer term problems that I think that need to be fixed. And they will be fixed if and only if the Spanish people derive the right lessons.
Jorge, I think we could talk about this even for hours. You really did a good job giving us a summary. We haven't even gone that so far in depth, but we're gonna follow and see what the next revelations will be. For now, thank you so much for being with us here today and really give a good understanding of the situation. I would really love to urge all of our viewers to follow your work. What is the best way they can do that?
Well, thank you. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Twitter, and I follow a lot of people there too. And it's always a nice way to interact. As you mentioned at the beginning, I work at the Center for Fundamental Rights, and I write for the Critic somewhat regularly, and maybe another place or two. But I would say those are the main channels.
Thank you so much, Jorge, and we'll see you definitely very soon back on the channel. And of course, thank you so much for our viewers at home for watching.
Thank you, Scarlett.